Over the past 30 years, the average annual income in Japan has been on a downward trend, for the younger generation in particular. While incomes remain low and are unlikely to rise, social insurance contributions have doubled since the 80s, consumption tax has reached 10%, and prices continue to rise. According to some non-profit organizations, more young people than ever have no home, are moving from one internet cafe to another, and are living hand-to-mouth on a day-to-day basis through temporary work. Poverty among young people has become normalized. Many older people believe all that is needed to fix the problem is a change of attitudes and lifestyles, the Japanese equivalent of forsaking avocado toast to buy a house. Previous generations underestimate how much of their own good fortune stems not from hard work, but the asset bubble lottery. Consequently, they are largely unaware of their own class fixation. Recently, the term oyagacha has come into use, meaning children cannot choose their parents. It is analogous to the gacha, or lottery, in smartphone games and toy vending machines, a reflection of the growing realization that the environment in which someone is born and raised has a significant impact on their life. For these young people, the only hope is what they refer to as a miracle comeback. Those who are looking for a quick turnaround don't always rule out the miracle potential of skirting with the law. After all, the clear message that society sends to them is that being a winner is measured solely by wealth, not virtuous principles or a social conscience. As a consequence, criminal cases stemming from young people, especially those in their 20s, becoming involved in fraudulent pyramid schemes, has rapidly increased from around 30% in 2012 to 43% in 2018. It doesn't take a great leap of imagination to understand how phrases like "anyone can make money" or "get rich today" are particularly attractive to people living in poverty. Nor is it difficult to understand how they might envy and wish to emulate those who appear to have achieved huge financial success solely by virtue of their entrepreneurial attitude and wise investment strategies. But as the old saying goes, money attracts money, and the largely invisible role of education, social connections, unequal opportunity, and superior access to information doesn't enter into the equation. For these desperately impoverished young people, seed capital is an unfamiliar and unattainable concept, which renders them vulnerable to loan sharks and the entirely new hell of spiraling debt. This can leave them with little option but to seize upon the Yami-baito recruitment posts on global social network sites that don't root out or outlaw the advertising of illegal part-time jobs, an important part of their corporate social responsibility. Of course, the posts are vague and make no explicit mention of law-breaking, focusing instead on cash-in-hand rewards that any sensible and sober person would consider fishy. An offer of anywhere between 50,000 yen, around $358, to 100,000 yen, or $716, for unskilled day labor is quite beyond belief, especially when the ads insist that the work is quite easy and anyone can do it. But desperation trumps disbelief, with the threat of criminal debt collectors hanging over you. These posts are placed by tokushu sagi groups, or special fraud groups. It is estimated that the number of such groups in Japan is in the hundreds. Like any form of pyramid scheme, they are staunchly hierarchical, but little else is known about their modus operandi or who sits at the head of the pyramid, extracting maximum benefit. Wouldn't it be ironic if it turned out to be the very paragons of success that young people aspire to be? When someone interested in an advertisement sends a DM, they are instructed to communicate with a contact person via more confidential messaging apps. Initially, they are offered a relatively easy task for 30,000 to 50,000 yen, or $214 to $357. They may be told to deposit their mobile phone in a locker at a local station for a day, or open a new bank account and obtain an ATM card. If the applicant accepts, the recruiter cheerfully indicates that a copy of the candidate's ID, home address, work address, and telephone number, as well as their parents' home address and telephone number, are merely a formality. Questions about the legality of the work are met with lies and suggestions that under 20-year-olds cannot be imprisoned or that no one has ever been caught. However, once the candidate has incriminated themselves, all pretense of gentle treatment evaporates. Threatened with exposure of their illegal activity via social media and potential for harm to their family, the option to refuse future work evaporates. From now on, the victims of these scams become expendable foot soldiers, ukeko, responsible for receiving credit cards or cash from scam victims, or daishiko, responsible for withdrawing funds from the victim's account at a specific ATM. A decade ago, the overwhelming majority of criminal scams were relatively simple, such as the ore ore, or "it's me" phishing scam. Elderly parents would receive a message or phone call purporting to be from a close family member in trouble and in urgent need of money. But in recent years, the scams have become so sophisticated that every new recruit receives an instruction manual that they are told to follow to the letter. These highly detailed manuals are very easy to understand, but even so, on the day of the crime, they are told to have an open phone connection with a senior gang member designated as an instructor, and to follow their instructions to the letter via wireless earbuds. Monitoring the conversation between recruit and victim, as well as verifying their location via map apps, etc., the instructor can ensure the desired outcome remotely with minimal risk to themselves. Scams requiring a certain amount of theatre are on the rise. For example, victims are visited by what appears to be a young police officer with a realistic-looking ID card. He will explain that he is there to report fraudulent banking activity and help the victim by freezing their account. When he receives the victim's card, he will replace it with a genuine-looking fake made in advance. He will immediately hand this over to a dashiko, who will also receive direct instructions about when and where to withdraw funds at a designated location. At no point do these foot soldiers have any physical contact with their supervisors or have any way to identify them. A person in this novice role who shows a particular talent for scamming may quickly be promoted to a higher tier. For example, kakeko, or deceivers, deceive people on the telephone. In a media interview, a former kakeko explained that he was given a script and would make 300 to 400 calls a day on the basis that only 1 in 300 people is fooled. Behind the scenes, there are scenario writers who earn huge sums and enjoy copyright protection of their scripts, which cannot be used without permission, or hefty penalties are incurred. Fraudsters have been around since at least the 1920s, but bank withdrawal limits have tipped the balance between risk and reward, giving rise to the need for a large expendable army of part-time foot soldiers. But an increasing number of groups are finding it more profitable to shift to tataki, which means burgling a house or shop. Studies indicate that the housebreakers tend to be victims of gambling debts. Limited and strictly controlled legal gambling, such as pachinko and bicycle, boat and horse racing, have existed in Japan for many years. But desperate young people are attracted to more accessible online casinos that promise to offer a higher rate of return. Data shows that pachinko addicts have an average debt of 1.5 million yen, or $10,700. By contrast, online casino addicts have debts of around 5 million yen, or $36,000, which suggests the latter is far more addictive. Inevitably, many people end up in hock to loan sharks connected to special fraud groups. In no time at all, a debt of $710 can turn into $7,100, ensuring a steady supply of cornered youths willing to commit robberies on behalf of the organization. Some online ads are open and explicit in their use of the word tataki, but appear not to receive takedown notices. These tend to be more risky and ambitious schemes that offer between 500,000 and 1 million yen, between $3,590 and $7,200 to their untested recruits. During a robbery that took place in January 2023, young men recruited through a so-called dark part-time job ad on social media were arrested and now face lengthy criminal sentences. A 90-year-old lady living alone was killed during the attempt to loot her valuables. For inexperienced part-timers following remote instructions, knowing just how hard to hit a 90-year-old, to scare her without killing her was, in this case, wide of the mark, with tragic consequences for everyone except the gang leaders, who remain safe and sound via a remote connection. In recent years, the upper echelons of special crimes groups have moved abroad, for example, to poorer countries in Southeast Asia. It's safer and more convenient to be based in countries which already have high crime rates and well-established corruption among law enforcement. The fraud group executives live in luxurious hotels abroad and enjoy opulent lifestyles, while giving instructions to Japan's maturing army of disenfranchised street urchins who shelter overnight in internet cafes. Above them there is almost certainly a group of long-established organized criminals, Yakuza, or Hangure, which translates as semi-Yakuza. In the 1990s, new anti-Yakuza laws were introduced that succeeded in cutting off almost all of their traditional sources of income. But at the time there were already reports of Yakuza organizations successfully playing the global stock market. Contrary to popular culture's romanticization of Yakuza as quintessentially Japanese gangsters with strong nationalist tendencies, many of the young people it would traditionally recruit from motorcycle gangs were second and third generation immigrants. Although the alienated youth from which contemporary new recruits are drawn still form supportive groups with their peers, a former police officer insists that they are less likely to swear allegiance to an oyabun or godfather and refuse to submit absolutely to the opinions, political or otherwise, of their seniors. It is thought that every Yakuza or Hangure organization will maintain a number of separate fraud groups, but it is impossible to form an accurate picture because the remote higher ranks are so rarely arrested. Lists of potential victims that offer a high likelihood of success are traded on the dark net. Sophisticated reconnaissance exercises identify whether those with high incomes or inherited assets may prove susceptible to scams and keep cash or valuables at home. This intelligence is then used to compile the Mac manual, or McDonald's manual, for young recruits to follow. Modern Japan has consistently enjoyed relatively low rates of crime, most especially crimes of violence, which makes this new wave of youth crime all the more perplexing for the casual observer. Of course, many legitimate businesses are profiting from alarming media reports and hand-wringing conversations about the steep rise in crimes that is fueling a proliferation of private security firms, gated communities, CCTV cameras, and security devices with panic buttons. But to date, concerted action against advertising quick-fix schemes to desperate young people has not been forthcoming. Instead, they are lectured about the dangers of getting involved in the labour black market, but offered no alternative way out of their dire circumstances. It's fair to say that many of us around the world are exhausted. Getting through the day is a constant challenge, and we have little headspace to spare. Compassion fatigue is at an all-time high. Even those who are willing to face the harsh realities of contemporary society want a message of hope, not just a catalogue of misery. And yet, when responsibility for every social ill is laid firmly at the door of the individual, no matter how many disadvantages they face, it is difficult to see any hope of building a better world for everyone. A survey conducted in 2019 by the state-owned broadcaster NHK neatly summarizes the scale of the challenge. In Japan, the environment in which one was born and brought up massively influences one's life. Among other things, one's life is greatly influenced by the university they graduated from. In our society, money makes most things possible, while people don't think human connections, nature, or the environment are very important. Hard work may go rewarded, but if you try to live differently from others, you will get into trouble. For runaways sleeping on the floor of internet cafes, who never had any hope of affording the entrance exam costs, let alone attending a credible university, the message that comes through loud and clear is that money makes most things possible. Unless civil society offers them possibilities, sets aside its unhealthy obsession with orthodox conformity, and reassesses the broken relationship between price and value, there will always be criminal recruiters who exploit the liberating, romantic appeal of becoming an outlaw. For young Japanese people already living outside the strict confines of everyday society, living outside the law is not such a giant leap. The cruel and terrible irony of this story is that the older generations who attribute the miserable lives of these young people to a failure of character are precisely the most likely victims for remote gangs to target. After all, their recruitment efforts succeed via the weaponization of empathy that is so lacking elsewhere. Evidently, attending the right university hasn't helped those in authority to figure out that simple, deeply perverse fact. Until they do, everyone not installed in a luxury hotel is a loser.